This is part 5 and actually the last part for chapter 1. Okay, so we ended our part 4 with talking about the serous membranes, and that they are membranes that either surround the heart, the lungs, or the abdominal organs, the abdominal cavity, and they're going to have two layers: a visceral layer that actually contacts the organs and a parietal layer that lies on the outside with a space in between called a cavity. Okay, so when we look at the thoracic cavity or the chest cavity, which contains the heart and the lungs, and it's divided from the abdominopelvic cavity by the diaphragm, the thoracic cavity contains 3 internal chambers. It contains a pericardial cavity, which the heart resides in, and 2 pleural cavities, one for each lung. Both of these cavities are lined by a serous membrane. The pericardial cavity is lined by the pericardium, which we talked about already in detail. The visceral pericardium contacts the heart. The parietal pericardium is the outer layer that lies against the pericardial wall. So in between the, when we go to the next one, the pleural cavities contain the lungs, and so we call the serous membrane that surrounds the lungs the pleura. The visceral pleura actually contacts the surface of the lungs, and the parietal pleura lines the body wall. So let's go back and talk about what the mediastinum is. And that is the area in between the 2 lungs, and it does contain the heart. It contains the pericardial cavity. And then below the thoracic cavity is the abdominopelvic cavity, and it's below the diaphragm. It's divided into the superior portion is the abdominal cavity, and the inferior is the pelvic cavity. And the serous membrane is called the peritoneum. So it lies within, it forms the peritoneal cavity. So the peritoneum contains the visceral peritoneum, which covers the abdominal organs, like it contacts the surface of the liver and the intestines and the stomach. And the parietal peritoneum lies against the abdominal body wall. Some of the organs that lie actually behind the peritoneum are called retroperitoneal. So they don't actually lie within the peritoneal cavity. And these are organs like the kidneys. They are retroperitoneal. So if we look here at these figures, the thoracic cavity, you can see the pleura, which lines the lungs, and then the pericardium, which lines the heart, the diaphragm that separates the thoracic and the abdominopelvic cavities. Then you see the peritoneum, which lines the abdominopelvic cavity. If we look at a transverse section through the thoracic cavity, you can see the pericardium surrounding the heart and the pleura surrounding the lungs. And then you can also see clearly the mediastinum, which is all this area in between the lungs. Okay? And then let's see, I think this might be the last ones. Describe 2 essential functions of body cavities. Well, they hold the organs that reside within those cavities, and they also can help to reduce, they can protect and help to reduce friction. Describe the various body cavities of the trunk, and we had the thoracic, the abdominopelvic, and then you could go even further inside the thoracic cavity is the pericardial and the pleural cavities, the mediastinum, and then the abdominopelvic cavity. If a surgeon makes an incision just inferior to the diaphragm, what body cavity will be opened? Well, let's look. This is the diaphragm. Inferior is going to be below it, so that's going to be the abdominopelvic cavity. So This was very short, but that's the end. Just remember for Chapter 1 that it's very, very, very important. I cannot stress this enough, that you know the anatomical landmark figures. So this is actually, let's look and see what slide this is. This is actually slide number 45. So if you go back to your slides, you need to learn slide number 45. And also, you can go into your e-text also has this figure, and you can also find, in fact, look, since I'm doing this, let me show you where you can find an unlabeled figure. Let's see, I think if we go to the quiz, okay, yeah, so if you go to your quiz, here is an unlabeled figure. And you can go back and redo this quiz. You can do the quiz 5 times. Now this quiz question only asks you the pollex is located in which region, and of course that's region 12 because it's the thumb. But you can actually use this figure and I don't know, just screenshot it or something, you know, and make your own little study guide. But here's the figure. One of the questions has the anterior view, and then there's also a posterior view. Yeah, there we go. So you just kind of have to look in your quiz and find those figures, but they're unlabeled, so that can help you to practice. I would strongly recommend that you do that.